So it's just after 7 o'clock. Let's get going. Welcome to those of you who've joined already. I'm sure there'll be others who will join in as we go, and that's fine. We'll catch up with them at the end with any questions. So what we're talking about today is the Sirdar Applied Directorship program. So this is an introduction to the program that we run in various regions, including Kenya, Ghana, Johannesburg, and Cape Town. I am Tim Holmes. I'm the head of sales at Sirdar and one of the partners, and based in Cape Town. So what we're talking about and why we do what we do is because we at Sirdar believe that if we create great directors, then we change lives. So growing directors, good directors grow companies, and we can see that there are examples of where good directors are growing companies. But what we believe is we can take it to another level, that if we can help and support and train great directors, then they really change lives in a much broader context. And that starts really because the board is and should be driving the business. It should be the leaders in the business. It should be the apex of the structure in the business. And if you get the board right, then you can really change the outcome of the business. And any business has an impact on a much broader context than just shareholders. It has an impact on a multitude of stakeholders, community, staff, suppliers, clients, etc. So if you can get companies to grow and perform the way they should do at their potential, then you can have a massive impact. And that's particularly relevant in South Africa. So that's what drives us. We want to create these situations and the opportunities for great directors to perform. The reason why the course is structured the way it is, and we'll go into obviously that in more detail, is because we've learned, and maybe this is an opportunity to just take a step back and explain why there are so many pictures of mountains. Sirdar, the name Sirdar comes from the name for the lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. So business is like a mountain. You know, building a business is difficult, like climbing a mountain is difficult. And when we're choosing the size of business we want to build, we need to understand the differences. We need to understand the complexities of that particular size of business, type of business, etc. Just as if we were climbing a mountain. If we're climbing a hill, you do less equipment, less preparation, you can get away with more, you can make mistakes, and it's not going to kill you. If you're climbing something like an Everest, you make mistakes, you certainly will die. So when we're building a business, we need to clearly understand right at the outset, how big a business do we want to build? So then the job of the Sirdar is to help and support that founder, those business leaders, to make sure they've got the right team, make sure they're properly equipped, they've got the right tools for the journey, to make sure they're prepared, they're trained, they're ready at the bottom, at the beginning, at the start, so that when you're on the journey, you're then being guided on that journey, and you're not getting halfway up. So go flipping back to the mountain analogy, you're not halfway up the mountain, you're still wearing your high-heeled shoes or your slops. You're properly prepared from the beginning. So just like climbing a mountain, you can't learn from reading a book. Being a director is no different. You need to have practical experience in order to be an effective director. And that means practical time in the boardroom is so critical. And just definitely is a strong correlation with success in a boardroom and becoming a high performance director. So the reason that we've structured the program in the way we structured it was to try and make it as real as possible. So as I said, we'll go into the detail later, but the idea was, let's put together a program which is as close as we can get to what the reality would be of a boardroom of a company that meets every month. So the program is structured to include 8 monthly board meetings, because what we want people to learn as part of the program is how do you fit real life around your role as a director. And if you don't experience it in a training program in a safe space, and you can't find the time in that training program in that safe space, then our I suppose our question to you is, can you find the time in reality to be a truly effective non-executive director? So we've structured the program on as if you are having a board meeting every month, and background reading and preparation exactly as you would have for a proper board meeting. So is this you? Is this something that you should be doing? So what is it written for? What is it developed for? It's developed for people who run a business and are looking to implement evaluating boards. So it's an opportunity for you to skill yourself up so that you're ready to bring in other directors, or at least have a much better context and understanding of what running a board really means. Because too often we sign the form to say we're now a director of business, and almost by divine intervention, we expect that we're somehow going to learn how to be a director. And it's not that simple. We need to have proper training, and that training is not that easy to access generally. We're not taught this stuff at school. We're not taught this stuff at university, not even on business courses. And in fact, I'd hazard a guess to say that there's nowhere near enough of this stuff taught on even MBA programs. Certainly better than it was, but it's still not up to the level it should be. So it's got a business now. How do I improve my own skill and ability so I can make a difference and really implement evaluating board? Sorry, just struggling with technology. Here we go. So you've taken over a family business and you're looking to be recognized as a director that has the skill and knowledge and fulfill the role. So very much the succession planning. It could be the son or the daughter taking over from their parents, whatever the circumstances is that's led to that opportunity. But you want to make sure you're coming in from day one with the skills and knowledge to do the job properly. Or you're looking for your first appointment as a non-executive director. So even if someone's in a business full-time job, I would strongly recommend that you look for an appointment as a non-executive director outside that business, outside your own business, because you really want to understand what this role is about. The best way to learn it is in a situation where you are only carrying that role. There's no other conflict of a management role or a shareholder role. You're just a director. And very quickly you start to understand what that means. And you have the opportunity to then bring that learning back into your own business or the business that you're working for. You have an opportunity to become a director. So we have a lot of people that are coming onto this course. They've been given the opportunity to become a director, but they're a little bit nervous because they don't feel that they've got the skill and ability to add value quickly. So that part of this program is to get people up to speed as fast as possible so they can really add value and walk into that role with confidence that they know what they're talking about and they can stand up to the other more experienced directors from a position of knowing. Or you want to develop your skills further. In other words, you've had non-executive director positions before, or you're currently in a non-executive director position, and just starting to realize, actually, I need to know an awful lot more about this stuff if I'm really going to do the job properly, if I'm really going to be professional in this role. So what do we talk about in terms of high performance directors? Why are they important? Because privately held family businesses, even listed companies and public entities, are looking for directors who both understand the law and know how to effectively contribute in the boardroom. So it's not just enough to have read the books. You really need to know how you can contribute, the questions you need to ask, the preparation you need to really add value, etc., etc. So we've been doing this for a while, and the way the program came about was really taking the learning of the last 10 years of being involved in implementing boards. So just as a very brief aside, Sirdar runs education programs. We help and support companies to find and appoint independent directors through a director network. And we also have been running what we call a guide process where we support the board end to end. So we'll put together and help put together templates for the pre-board meeting and make sure the pre-board meeting happens. Then we'll help and support the board to put together the board papers and the agenda and make sure they work together and that they're properly concise papers that are going to those board papers. We then help and support them to run an effective board meeting, take the minutes, give them feedback on the minutes, etc. So it's a proper support on an ongoing basis. And doing that for the last 10 years, we learned an awful lot about what works and what doesn't work. So we've tried to take all of that skill and knowledge and understanding and bring it into this program. So what do companies say? They say, give us a director who has practiced their skill and experience in a boardroom. And how do you get that first position is a question that often happens. So what we tried to do with the program was say, look, let's make sure you've had enough of an experience that you can say, I've practiced this skill. So, 8 board meetings where you're in a high performance board structure, you're running a high performance board process, you've got facilitators that can help, you understand what's expected of you, you've got materials backing up the particular topic you're talking about in those given months. So you really start to learn what it means to be in a boardroom, be the chairman, be a secretary, etc. And then you have a self-reflection exercise after the board meeting, and then you prepare for the next board meeting, and the same happens. So you start a chance to repeat the learning, try stuff, repeat stuff, learn from it, repeat it, learn from it, repeat it. So going into an interview with a company, you can really put your hand on your heart and say, look, I've practiced this skill. You may not have been in a live boardrooms per se, but I've really practiced this skill. And actually, we'd say that so many boards are verging on completely dysfunctional that you're not really learning best practice just by being on a board. And just because someone has been a chief executive does not mean they know how to relate to me as a director. So it's really important to understand that director experience or chief executive experience are different. So in a chief executive role, it's a management role, it's a leader of the management. People are going to then do what you tell them to do. You tend to dominate, are likely to dominate the conversation, particularly around strategy. It's part of a hierarchy. Whereas being a director is very different, and it's part of a team. There should be no hierarchy at board level. It should be a room full of equals. And sometimes that transition from being the apex of a hierarchy to being now suddenly a team of equals is quite difficult for chief executives to handle. And we want to know that you, as in Sirdar, have said that they know what they're doing. So if we're appointing someone to a board or putting forward someone as a shortlist, the company wants to know that we've tested those person's ability, that we've interviewed them, that we've seen them in action, we've got some proof that they can do what they say they can do. And obviously being part of something like this Applied Directorship program, to be able to see directors in action gives us much more comfort that those individuals, when we're putting them forward for placement, actually know what they're doing. And it's not about certification, it's about understanding. So this is not just a classroom process where you take an exam at the end and you say you know and understand what it means to be a director. You've got to practice it, you've got to implement it, you've got to learn from that implementation, learn from failing with that implementation, and try again and try again and try again. This is just an example of a case study of a company that's been working with Sirdar for a while. And it just really to try and illustrate that there's all kinds of reasons why a private or family business might be looking to put together a board or looking to bring directors onto their board. And it's important that non-executive directors understand those things. And probably the biggest single one is the fear of losing control. And as Gavin said, at the end of the day, it was a non-issue for him. And actually, you start to understand that those non-executive directors are there really purely to help you and support you and help you build a better business. Yes, they have to challenge you. Yes, they have to make sure that you're being held accountable for the strategy or whatever the particular tasks are that have been assigned. But the most important role is actually just to support that MD and make sure, and particularly the founder, to make sure they've got access to the things they need access to. They've got support where they need it, and they can really drive the business forward. In his particular case, he wanted to reduce the amount of hours he was spending per week in the business. And now, as far as I know, Gavin's got 3 or 4 different business units, and he's well under his 30 hours a week. And I think his wife's almost moved into semi-retirement because they don't need her involvement to anything like the extent that they did right at the beginning. So one really important point to get across is, if you want to be evaluating high performance director, it requires a significant amount of time and commitment. But it also requires that you've got some kind of guidance from an external party to make sure you're doing the best job you can. So the major output of doing a program with a group of people like the Applied Directorship program is that you're in a team. So you're operating in a cohort of 12 to 20 people. You'll split into teams of 3 or 4 boards. And throughout the program, you stay in those boards. So you're working with a team of 4 or 5 people for most of the duration of the program. And you're also engaging with the people in the room, sharing experiences, sharing ideas, sharing of ways of doing things differently and better, as well as obviously having access to the facilitator and all the materials in the background. But it really takes a commitment to your own development. With the way directorship, the laws around directorship, the commitment needed from directors now, it really needs incoming directors to commit to their own development. They need to understand far more than they ever needed to in the past about what the law requires, what is expected of them from a care, skill, and diligence perspective, etc., etc. It's a much bigger animal than it was 5, 10, certainly 20 years ago. So what are we trying to help you achieve? So one of the biggest things is, anybody come into this program, there's a likelihood that their goal is to get appointed as a director and break out of that struggle you've had to determine in that first step. So that's what we're trying to help and support you to understand, is this is what it really means to do it. So by the end, you should be really clear on, okay, I'm fully committed to this from a place of knowing, not just from a place of faith. It also means that you're coming into the conversation with a potential board or organization where you have got some practical experience that you can talk about. You've heard stories from other people that you can also talk about. You've got a certificate of attendance, certificate of competence from a company like Sirdar that's recognized in the marketplace. So it just puts you that much further up the ladder from someone who doesn't have any of that experience at all. And also, being part of the director network, we're going to actively seek appointments for members of that network and coach you if you get onto the shortlist based on your skills and location and whatever else the criteria are. If you get onto that shortlist, we're going to be there to help and coach you and support you to make sure that you do perform the best you can in that interview and that you do have the best chance of getting that appointment. But it's like starting a new career. You're starting from zero, effectively, if you haven't been appointed before. So you need to work your own networks. You need to use our networks. You need to use any networks you can. You need to make sure you're skilled up to give you the best possible opportunity to get into the space of the non-executive director. And that how, once you're in the room, so if you may have given the opportunity already, or now you've got the position. But the whole point of doing a program like this is that you can really truly add value in the boardroom from the first minute, if possible, but certainly pretty soon. And if you are already at that level, it's really acknowledging that feeling it's time to take your skills direct to the next level. So we've had quite a few people on the program who've been directors on listed boards, or they've been directors for 10, 20, 30 years on a variety of family and private company boards. But they've realized that the landscape has shifted, that being a director is much more onerous than it ever was before. And they really need to upskill themselves to be able to operate in that new space and manage the risks of this new space. And if you are in the situation where you're a shareholder manager, if you want to create a board that really adds maximum value, it's important to understand for yourself what a high performance board director looks like, because then you can assess whether someone you're bringing into the organization is likely to add value, because you know what questions to ask. You've got a reference point to work from. And we also want to allow people to achieve recognition as someone that knows what it really means to be a high performance director. So that's the idea of teaching methodology, teaching proper board process, proper best practice board process, giving you access and examples to templates for agendas, for pre-board meetings, for all of those things that you'll use during the course of the program, giving you access to videos, to reading materials, etc. So again, you can carry that position of someone who knows what it really truly means to be a high performance director through a knowing, through a deep understanding. And just the fact it's going to add credibility to your profile. So Sirdar name is certainly building itself a reputation throughout Africa, and it's now carrying weight to say, okay, I've done a Sirdar program. It just makes the application process for directorship that much easier. And I think one thing that's underestimated is there is a big gap between being a successful executive and being a successful independent director. And it's important to understand what that looks like, and then also understand and give you tools to bridge that gap so that you can make as successful a transition as possible. And maximize potential fees. So I'm on a number of boards, and I've been on a journey of developing my skills as a director, and having done the Applied Directorship program a couple of years ago, I saw a fundamental shift in my own personal ability to generate potential fees, because I just had so much clearer understanding of all of the different aspects. You know, even working in the organization, you don't necessarily get exposed to everything, but if you go through the program, the wealth and depth of material is quite astounding, and it definitely makes a difference and gives you the confidence to ask for higher director fees. And be prepared for the boardroom, understand the board process, really get into the rhythm of the board process because you've practiced it. And I suppose challenge your own understanding. It's very easy to get complacent about, okay, well, I've done this before, I've done this for years, I know what I'm talking about. But really, the idea of this program is to challenge what you think you know and expose you to to things that you may not have been exposed to at all, so that you can ask that question. What else? What else? What else? What else can I do better? What else must I dig into? What else must I know to really lift my contribution? And going along with the potential fees, I mean, there's a serious opportunity to improve the quality of appointments you get, because you've demonstrated your commitment. You've been through an 11-month program. You've committed the time and effort to going through all the different materials. You've committed your money to developing your own personal, taking your own personal learning journey. So it all adds up. It's all stuff that you can add to your CV. So program overview. Just as a way of background, we are a leader in education, appointing, and guiding high performance boards, but we specifically focus on privately held and family businesses. So the content of the program is around what you need to understand in that context, because a private and family business is different from a corporate board, is different from a listed board. There's a need to be much more of a mentor, to have a much higher EQ, to not completely overload the MD so that they fail because they just can't implement all of the things the board's throwing at them. So that's part of the program, is to help them build that understanding that there needs to be a different way of approaching the role of a director than the more clinical, risk-based tick box kind of approach that tends to be prevalent in larger corporates or in the listed space. What is the difference between an MBA and the Sirdar Applied Directorship program? It's a question that comes up often. MBA is a very worthwhile program if you want to develop your skill and ability as a manager and you want to move into the role of an MD, particularly in a corporate environment. So they say if you want to become the CEO of one of the top 50 corporations in the States, then you do your MBA with Harvard. It's that kind of concept. You go to an establishment that has a good reputation, it's going to expose you to all the different areas of business, whether it be HR, marketing, whatever. That's its role, that's its purpose. We follow a similar learning style in that everybody's in groups. So you're in your seminar groups, you have lots of self-learning you need to do. You need to find time and dedicate to make it happen, particularly compared with a part-time MBA. But the focus is exclusively on directorship. This is not a management training program. This is a directorship training program. And that's the clear distinction. So you're not quite as onerous as an MBA because it's probably 3 or 4 hours a week that you need to commit to get the program done in addition to the half-day board meeting. But it's very focused on the directorship path and growth path, much more than the management training program. And it's very different from a 1 week intense program, because an extended program, as I said at the beginning, we're trying to simulate real life. So you've got to fit this thing in with real life. But if it's an extended program, it also gives an opportunity to build habits, because it's not clinical. It's this other stuff gets in the way. You have chance to self-reflect. You're not in a lecture kind of environment and then taking an exam. You've actually got to demonstrate that you can do it. So we discovered quite quickly that the only way to get that to work properly was on a much longer extended program rather than sort of residential weeks that you might have on a more formal degree or university-based program. And it's theory and simulation. It's not just theory versus simulation. So we see that we need both. So the core of the monthly 4-hour sessions is a simulation and the opportunity to act in a boardroom. The theory is mostly shared via education platform through videos, audios, and then some reading materials. So it says it's an 11-month program structured around 8 board meetings. So the first 2 sessions are the introduction, ready to get you going, get everyone on the same page, build a base level of understanding about what this whole thing about being a director is all about. So the first session, we talk about the different hats. So the hats of being a director, manager, and shareholder, and you go through worked examples. So you can build a deeper understanding of what it means to wear the different hats, how you have to think differently wearing the different hats, how the responsibilities are different, and talk about an introduction to the director's duties. And then there's a lot of videos, etc., that explain these things in more detail. In month 2, it's now about putting the board together. So you go through a director selection and appointment process. So you understand the theory, understand a little bit more about the complexity of finding the right directors for a board. And we apply the same knowledge and understanding when we're putting together the boards that you then sit in the rest of the program. So we use a profiling tool called Contribution Compass to do personality profiles, because we've realized that if you understand the contribution that each person makes with their own natural energy, and you blend that with people from different profiles, you get a much better outcome at board level or in any team for that matter, because you get much more complete thinking. So we try to build these simulated boards using the profile process. We also try to make sure you don't have a bunch of lawyers on one and accountants on another. So wherever there's skill sets, we try and distribute those skill sets across the boards in the program. And then obviously trying to make sure that if you've got multiple people from the same company, again, that they're not sitting in the same boards. So you get the concept and idea of, I'm now in a board of other students as part of this cohort, but they are strangers, as if you were coming onto a board as a non-executive director. You're now trying to share this process with strangers. You're trying to build a cohesive team from starting point for a group of strangers. So again, trying to make it as real as possible. So that's month 2. Now I've decided who your boards are. You also choose, so the simulation is based on a manufacturing company. So you choose what you're going to make. And then each board decides what they're going to call themselves. So they give themselves a company name. Then that name and then the logo that you come up with is then on your board papers going forward. And we refer to you from that point onwards as the board X, the board Y, the board Z. So month 3, we start the proper process of board meetings. So month 3 is your first board meeting. And we go around what you'll be introduced to as the governance compass, which talks to the 8 areas of strategy that we believe any board should cover during the course of a year. So this is your board calendar. The dates you get for the program is effectively your board calendar for the year. So in month 3, you talk about strategy and direction, and you need to develop the strategy and direction for your new simulated company. How are you going to outcompete the other boards in the room? 4th module is the next segment of the governance compass, which is about organizational culture. And again, there's lots of materials related to each of these topics that are opened up, and you can then go and digest and review on the online platform. So we see that once you've got an understanding of where the company is going, the next piece is you've got an understanding of what the culture of the organization is, what it is right now, and what it needs to be in order to drive that strategy. Because if they're not in alignment, if the culture of the organization is not in alignment with where the company wants to go, then it's going to fail immediately, and the strategy is just not going to happen. Once you've got the culture and the strategy this time, and then the next step is to make sure you've got the right team. So we go through an example of a chief executive performance enhancement process. There's examples of succession planning and how to organize that, etc. But the key concept that we're trying to get across in this module is, if you understand the direction, you understand the culture, now it makes it much easier to determine whether you've got effective leadership to drive that forward. In month 6, we go into stakeholder engagement. So you've got your core company functions working. Now you can start looking at how you engage with other stakeholders. And it's introducing really this concept of much broader stakeholder engagement than companies ever needed to really worry about before. It's much broader than just the shareholder. So we talk about, social and ethics committees, and what are the different things you need to think about in terms of the community, or the staff, or the suppliers, or those various different stakeholders. What does a stakeholder matrix look like? So I give you templates for those kind of things. Then we move on to shareholder expectations, a key fundamental foundational part and understanding you need to have as a board. If you don't understand what your shareholders' expectations are, then how can you possibly hope to make sure that you as a company and a board are delivering against those expectations? So we talk a lot about dividend policies, risk and return, but return rates, how you engage with shareholders meetings, that sort of stuff in this particular module. Then moving on to the next one is risk appetite, tolerance, and management. So have you determined what is the risk appetite of your business? What are the key risks in the business? How do you draw up a risk matrix? How do you measure risk in a business? And it's not just about compliance, but do you have an understanding of how your compliance process works internally? What are the standards expected from you externally with audits, etc., or other things linked to your particular industry? And then moving on to the finance part. So module 9 is around the finance, budget setting, what are appropriate board papers that you should be presenting in a board meeting? What level of understanding should you have as a director about be able to read financial reports? How to effectively communicate to the board if you're the FD, so that you can get feedback and you can drive strategy and get good results. So there's lots of materials, as I said, online that relate to this particular topic. And then the last of the formal modules is where you go back and do an evaluation of your board. So if, for example, you were a Sirdar client on the guide process, every year you do a board evaluation where you determine, have we done all the things we're supposed to have done? Have we implemented all the things we're supposed to have implemented? Are we on the same page in terms of strategy, etc.? So we go through an example of that process that you then run for your little board that you've been working with for the previous 9 months. So you get to experience it. And we just talk about that whole review process of self-evaluating as a director. What kinds of things should you be checking in on as a company, IT systems or policies, etc., etc. And then the 11th module is really this a closeout session. There's no particular syllabus for it. It was driven after running the first few programs by the delegates saying we just wanted an opportunity at the end to share our experiences with each other, understand why one particular company in the simulator performed better or worse than another company in the simulator, share our experiences with what we've learned along the journey, so that you've got that self-reflection. You've got a decent 3 or 4 hours to do that, rather than just sort of tagged on at the end of one of the other sessions. And then everybody goes out for lunch or goes out for dinner if it's an afternoon session, and just sort of closes out, rounds out. Everyone gets a chance to have a bit of a socialize, swap cards, and make sure that they stay in contact going forward, because networking is a key part of it. So this program, feedback from one of our clients, this program gave me insight into the breadth and depth of knowledge and experience required and the skills that need to be developed to be a great director. So that's really what it's about. It's understanding, what does a high performance director look like? What do I need to know to be able to call myself that? What does a high performance board need to be doing? What does that look like? What does that feel like? So at the end of the program, you can clearly picture what that looks like, because then it's very much easier to know what you're aspiring to. But if you don't have a clue what that really looks like, then people are just going to carry on operating in a very mediocre way. So even coming from a background with senior board experience, the Sirdar Applied Directorship program is a real eye-opener, forcing us to do a reality check for the better. And that's what it comes down to. Even if you've had years of experience as a board, I've yet to come across somebody who hasn't learned something along the way of doing this program and said, okay, sure, I wish I'd known that years ago. I wish I'd implemented that on so-and-so board that I've struggled with, etc., etc. So there's just such a wealth of knowledge in this program that I defy anybody to come through it and say they didn't learn something. The books that we refer to, the core reference material is the book we wrote a couple of years ago called Traversing the Avalanche. So during the program, you read the different chapters so that by the end of the program, you've read the whole book. And the material that's shared in the program is largely based on that content. The other book that you get exposed to is called Companies Act Unlocked. Just looking at on my shelf, it's about a 2 or 3 centimeter thick book that goes through the Companies Act in detail. Very well presented, actually. So for the South African market, I think it's a great volume. We've really struggled to find something similar in other areas of Africa. But yeah, I think the South African attendees are lucky that they've got such an easy reference manual to work with. And this is the Sirdar Enterprise Governance Compass that we talked about. So the program is based on taking you around the 8 segments of this. And we've put this diagram together and tried to structure it in such a way that it explained as many aspects of governance as possible in an easy to visualize form. So the North and South, purpose and sustainability, are forces that pull a company in opposite directions. So if you're really driving the purpose of this organization, often what happens is we forget about the implementation, we forget about the sustainability of the organization. And on the West and East, we've got performance and conformance. If we're growing this thing like crazy and we're pushing revenue like mad, people tend to not follow the rules as closely as they probably should. They don't follow the internal rules, and they definitely don't follow the external rules as clearly as they should. So if the focus is only on performance, what tends to happen is conformance tends to slip. So the circle is the company. It's this bubble, it's this balloon that's getting pulled in different directions. and it's only going to be sustainable. It's only going to perform at the best the way it can. It's only going to conform to the best it can. It's only going to fulfill its purpose if you try and keep the forces balanced. So it's something that as a director we need to constantly be aware of, that if each one of these aspects is pulling the company in a particular direction or isn't adequately resourced or adequately discussed at board level, then the company is going to become misshapen. It's going to become weakened in some form. So I hope that makes sense. And we just love compasses. That's a mountaineering analogy. So another compass. This one's the personality profile contribution compass tool we talked about. So as well as the books, you get a contribution compass token. So you get to understand a little bit more about your personality profile in this context. So the key, just overview, activating energy, it's very solutions driven, learning new things, doing new things. Sustain is completely opposite. It tends to be the profiles that prefer to not change things very much. They want to just do a better job of what they're doing, have a better understanding of what they're doing. In other words, sustain what already exists. It's that grounded earth energy. Use what we've got and we use it as effectively as possible. Inspiring energy on the east side, the right side is the people energy. So it's inspiring the people, leading the people, really taking the organization forward through making sure that the people are on board. It's the culture, all of those kind of things. And on the opposite side is the tempering energy, which is really about the pulling the levers, seeing the data, what's the impact, what's the trends. So just like a conductor in an orchestra, they don't play an instrument, but they guide the organization through a feedback mechanism. So it's no different for those personality profiles in an organization. They're very good at analyzing the sort of financial data or picking up trends that you may not see directly from just talking to people, because they're looking at analyzing the data, they're looking at the results, they're looking at the outputs, the outcomes. So we've worked out over the years that if you have a balance of these different profiles, balance these different energies at board level, then you make better decisions. You'll think about the what, you'll think about the who, you'll think about the when, where, you'll think about the how. So key point, so it's in a big gray box, because we cannot guarantee an appointment. Just like the fact you're a member of the Institute of Directors cannot guarantee an appointment. We can give you the tools, we can give you guidance, we can give you experience that will help you get that appointment, but unfortunately we can't guarantee it. So it's just something that needs to be stated. I don't want to set the perception that you're going to do the program, you're going to get on our director database, and next week you're going to get an appointment. There's all kinds of other variables that will impact that. As I said, it comes down to pushing your own personal networks, making sure that you're following up and actively seeking companies that need directors, etc. Maybe looking for lower hanging fruit, like getting onto the board of a body corporate or onto some kind of committee or a charity, that kind of thing, where you feel really that you want to give back to a particular charity. It's all board experience at the end of the day. So what are we trying to achieve by this thing? Reinforce and augment your knowledge, develop an understanding of what a highly effective and integrated board looks like and governance methodology. Be able to say that you've had experience of a high performance boardroom, so you can talk about it. You've been to the simulator, you've experienced it, you've done it, you've got stories to tell. And show working knowledge of essential tools. So the reading materials, the templates, the agendas, all of the things you've had access to throughout the program. Are those working tools that your toolbox you can then use going into a board context? And demonstrate practical experience. So you can say, I've been a chairman and I actually never want to do it again, or I really liked it and it's something I want to develop. You've been a secretary, you've taken the minutes and realized actually that's why it doesn't really work if the MD is taking the minutes, because they can't contribute as well in the meeting. It doesn't really work if the chairman's taking the minutes because they can't control and manage the meeting. So it's all of those kind of real life experiences that help and support when you're having a conversation back in the real world to say, look, guys, I think we need to do this differently. And understand your personal directorship strengths and the potential opportunities to develop further. So you've been exposed to all areas of what is involved as a director. So what is your key strength? What do you bring to the table? Are you very good at being calm and listening to everyone's point of view and summarizing effectively, etc.? Then maybe you should really start to drive a career as a chairman. Are you that person who asks the really difficult questions, just sits there quietly for a while, listening to whatever is happening and just says, but have you thought about so-and-so? And just stops everyone dead in their tracks, because that's that absolute nugget that transforms the organization. So it's really understanding what are those strengths so that you can build on those opportunities and develop further. So outcome, you receive a certificate of attendance if you've attended 9 out of the 11 sessions, and you get a certificate of competence, which we measure based on, throughout the program, there were various submissions that you make around self-reflection. So if you've watched all the videos, if you've done the self-reflection exercise, you've obviously demonstrated that you've put some thought into it. We can see that you're engaging in the board meetings. We can see that you're not just sitting back and letting everyone do stuff. Then at the end of the program, there'll be an interview process where we go through and just check your level of understanding, check your competency is at the required level. And then those other pieces of the puzzle come into play when making that determination. And if you've got no time for the course, then really I think it's worth considering whether you've got enough time to properly commit to the boardroom. The format, as I talked about, you get the certificates. It's a half-day workshop per month, depending on which program you're running, the Cape Town one, Joburg one, or other regions. There's a schedule of when the particular sessions happen in a particular cohort, and you can get access to them via our website, or send an email. I'll put my email address on at the end, and I can certainly send those through. But the idea is it's once a month, 4 hours a month, either in the morning or in the afternoon. There's the calendar for the year. Put it in your diary, commit to being there for those sessions as if you were on the board. And the best investment is in yourself. So if you really want to take your director understanding, your director career to the next level, or even your own executive director career to the next level, then you really need to make an investment in yourself. So what is that investment? So in the South African context, there's different pricing for the other regions. It's 48,750 plus that. Typical is pay the 10% deposit and then the 50% of what remains over the first 2 months of the program. And there's a 25% cancellation fee prior to commencement. We also offer other payment plans, monthly payment plans, etc. It's really up to you to come to us with an idea that fits in whatever makes sense for you. Could be linked to when you get paid bonuses. It could be linked to something you know is going to happen. You're going to get a commission payment in 3 months' time. That's all flexible. As I said, we've got 11 months with you in the room. We can make a plan somewhere between day 1 and day 330. And this is a program that we've been running since 2017. So there's a lot of people who've done this program. There's a lot of people who've given us feedback. We're confident that it's going to do the job. So invitation is to you is join the program so you can challenge your thinking, improve your prospects, and so you can begin your journey as a high performance director, whether or not you've been a director before. This is starting afresh almost and saying, right, I'm going to take this to a whole new level. So if you're ready, what do you need to do? There are links for each of the cohorts, but the best way to get to the full list is to go to this particular web link. It's on our website under the Services tab, Educate, and then you'll carry across to the Applied Directorship program. If you click on the region you want to apply for, that'll take you to an application form, We then review the application form to make sure that each person coming into the cohort is at a sufficiently high level. In other words, they've had some kind of senior management experience. They had the prospect of being a director sometime soon, so that we make sure we've got a room full of equals that can share and learn from each other as much as possible. And then pay a deposit or sign a debit order, whichever is your preference. And there's my contact details. So has anybody on the call got any questions? Otherwise, I can fire a few that were submitted earlier. Any questions? There should be a question box. I'm just going to try and make sure I've got it open. So typical questions we receive is, what can you expect to earn? It's a huge disparity. So it could be, and we did a survey last year on direct remuneration for private companies across Africa, and we're in the process of finalizing this year's one. And hopefully that'll give us a little bit more insight and build on what we had before. And it varies typically from maybe nothing to up to $20,000 a year. And anything between depends on the size of the company, depends on the complexity of the company, etc. So I think the best place is to go and download a copy of the survey to give you an indication. But yeah, so some people, if they desperately want to get their first place, might ask nothing, or they're really committed to the organization, they might ask nothing. And then as you become more professional, as the business gets more complex, then typically the fees rise with it. How do we find, or what sort of people come onto this program? So as I said, we've got executives. It could be professionals who want to upskill themselves so they can work better with their clients. Could be lawyers, accountants, and people who are on a career path to become a non-executive director. And that might be someone in semi-retirement, got a bit of time on their hands, or it may be that they're a consultant and this is like a portfolio career that they're building. Yeah, so those are very typical questions we have. None from the floor. Obviously, I've either spoken amazingly clearly, or you're completely dumbstruck and need time to think. Either way, please send me an email if you need any more information, or you like to talk a little bit more about your specific circumstances and whether you think you're ready for this journey. We've got programs starting next week in Johannesburg if you're really keen. The next ones will be starting in February in Cape Town, another one in January in Johannesburg, and then Ghana and Kenya will be following shortly thereafter. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all the best.